Last night, Joe Biden won big in South Carolina, and I'm going to break down this win and also show you why this really doesn't matter much for the rest of the race, even though cable news is going to try and act like this is, a complete reset on the campaign after Biden came in fourth and fifth in other states, has been essentially out of this race until now, Bernie winning the first three states. Understand, yes, if you're a Sanders supporter, it would have been nice to win South Carolina, obviously. But understand this is one state and Super Tuesday is a couple days away. So here are the results. As I told you, Joe Biden won big here, 48.5%, with Sanders at 19.9%. This is almost the complete reverse of what happened in Nevada, where Sanders won by about 26 points in Nevada, and Joe Biden wins around that amount here as well. So this is a big win. Let's not pretend it's not. This is a big win for Joe Biden. He really needed this to stay in the race. So he got the win that he needed. And nobody else here even hits 15%. So 15% is what's needed for statewide delegates. Only Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden have delegates out of this state. But a reminder how the race looks overall. Bernie Sanders currently still leads in pledged delegate totals. So because he won the first three states, Sanders sits with 56 delegates, pledged delegates, with Biden now at 51. So Biden overtook Buttigieg to sit here in second place behind Bernie Sanders. Now, let's get into some of the details here. So this is from Bo Erickson of CBS. Just out, CBS News exit polls, almost half of South Carolina Democratic primary voters say that Clyburn's endorsement of Biden was an important factor in their vote today. So this is one of the rare instances where an endorsement from a politician actually really mattered. So here, Joe Biden appeared to get a lot of support from people that hadn't voted yet in South Carolina, hadn't early voted. A lot of that support went to Joe Biden after Clyburn endorsed him. Let's close some tabs here. All right, this CNN exit polls say 70% of South Carolina voters were age 45 and above, highest share of the vote of any of the caucus or primary states so far. So this is why Joe Biden won. The media is going to tell you, it's because Joe Biden appeals the most to African-American voters, when, as I'm going to get to, that is not the reason. The reason is that Joe Biden appeals to much older voters. Bernie Sanders appeals to 45 and under. Joe Biden appeals to 45 and up, or mostly 65 and up. And South Carolina is a much older voting state. So this was always going to be a tough state for Bernie Sanders because Bernie's appeal is largely to 45 and under. That isn't to say Bernie doesn't have supporters that are over 45. Of course he does. He has a lot of them. But compared to Joe Biden's strength is 65 plus, and South Carolina is a good state for him. Now, with that said, look at the exit polling here on Medicare for All in South Carolina. So actually, first let's look at Iowa. So 57% of people favored Medicare for All in Iowa. New Hampshire, 58% favored Medicare for All. Nevada, 62% favored Medicare for All. South Carolina, 50% favored Medicare for All. So even though Bernie lost this state, came in second to Joe Biden, the majority of people that voted in South Carolina prefer Bernie Sanders when it comes to health care. They want his health care plan, not Joe Biden's. So this is another stat here that really shows you where the country is moving. Because even in a situation where Joe Biden has the older voters, many of those older voters still understand that Medicare for All is the answer. So I think this bodes well for Sanders going forward in other states. Now, this is a really good point. I covered South Carolina live last night on Twitch because I was watching a lot of cable news. I wanted to see what their reaction was. But I missed this, but this is a great comment. So Ben Dixon apparently had the comment of the night, and I would probably agree with this. Boomers have Medicare, pensions, and 401ks. They don't see the need for what Bernie offers them. So while I attribute a lot of the Biden support to people that are misinformed, uninformed. Again, we're talking about older voters, largely listening to cable news or, the New York Times analysis on the primary race. The reality is a lot of them they are informed, but they just don't care because their lives are fine. They don't have to worry about what people under 45 are worrying about. So for them, a political revolution isn't necessary because they're comfortable. They have their Medicare, pensions, and 401ks. So keeping this in mind when it comes to older voters, this is also part of the reason why, you could say a lot of them, as I said, are uninformed or misinformed, but a lot of them are still informed and they just don't want the Sanders platform because they're thinking about themselves and they're fine. So keep that in mind. Now, let's get to some of the misinformation. So this is Aaron Mattei here tweeting. After South Carolina, Rachel Maddow says that if Bernie Sanders continues to underperform systematically with black voters, that's an existential question. In reality, among black voters, Bernie finished second in Nevada and is first nationally. He's systematically leading. So let's first watch this short clip.
If anybody knows anything about winning the Democratic nomination and about what it takes for a Democratic nominee to win a general election, it is black voters.
Absolutely.
And if Senator Sanders continues to underperform systematically with black voters, and if we see him get shellacked, not just beaten, but shellacked tonight in South Carolina because of his performance with black voters, that's a existential question about that nomination.
Undoubtedly.
That is such misinformation. Joe Biden won South Carolina because of older voters. They keep putting, it's actually kind of disgusting what cable news does when it comes to race and their opinions on the Democratic primary. Black voters, just like white voters, they change their opinions depending on the age. So as I showed you earlier, a lot of people that support Joe Biden are older voters because their lives are fine. So Bernie Sanders, when you actually look at the data, as The Intercept writes here, don't tell cable news pundits that Bernie Sanders is leading nationally among black voters. So this is what the polling shows us. Because Bernie Sanders has such a strong hold on voters under 45 and still has some, many supporters over 45, he's actually leading with black voters nationally. But because South Carolina is an older state, they went with Joe Biden. That's the actual demographic difference here that you have to focus on, is the age difference, not the race. So again, this is cable news misinformation that people will continue absorbing, thinking there's something to it when there's not. Sean King tweets out here, more good news for Bernie Sanders in South Carolina. In 2016, running against one series candidate, he got 96,500 votes. So far, with votes still left to be counted, against 6 serious candidates, he got 101,126 votes. So that number is about, I think, 105,000 now. So Bernie Sanders outperformed his showing in 2016. Now, obviously, it's nowhere near where we would like to see it. But that said, he still overperformed where he was in 2016 in South Carolina. And other important data points here. This is from Kai Newkirk. According to South Carolina exit polls, Bernie Sanders won 40% of black voters under 30, beating Biden, 34% of voters under 45, beating Biden, 31% of working class whites, beating Biden, showing you that Bernie Sanders still has this working class, diverse, multiracial, multi-generational coalition of voters behind him. It's, again, like when you look at voters under 45, that's the Sanders strength. Biden's strength is voters over 65. And this is actually really good news for the Sanders campaign. As Tim Tagaris tweets out, you are proving we have a president who doesn't need to beg the powerful for money. That is revolutionary. So Bernie Sanders in the month of February raised $46 million, 2.2 million donations, about 1 donation per second. Top employers, Amazon, Starbucks, Walmart, 1.4 million donations from Super Tuesday voters. This is huge. So I think there's a comparison here. Here we go. So this is Kara Corte. She's been covering Sanders for CBS News. Bernie Sanders brought in massive 46.5 million haul in February from 2.2 plus million donations. including contributions from 350,000 first-time donors. February 29th was best single day of campaign, $4.5 million raised. So as Bernie's coming in second place in South Carolina, a distant second place in South Carolina, he raised the most money of any day during the campaign, showing you how powerful this people's movement is. And this important point here, the money that he raised in February, 46.5 million, crushes the 25 million raised in January, their previous monthly record. Showing you again, the campaign is growing in support. Now, let's get to Elizabeth Warren. So Elizabeth Warren came in fifth in this race. So you had Biden. Of course, I closed the tab, but you have Biden in first, Sanders in second, Steyer in third, I believe Buttigieg in fourth, Elizabeth Warren in fifth. And she's still in the race. And not only is she still in the race, but she also attacked Bernie Sanders in her speech. Watch this.
Demands more than a senator who has good ideas, but whose 30-year track record shows he consistently calls for things that fail to get done and consistently opposing things that nevertheless he fails to stop.
How dishonest is it to attack somebody for actually standing up for people? It's not Bernie's fault that the rest of Congress has been bought for the past 40 years. That isn't his fault. He's been on the right side of these issues, yet somehow Elizabeth Warren turns that into an attack line, acting like, oh, because Bernie Sanders, the single congressman or the single senator standing up for what is right, because he alone couldn't get, the Iraq War stopped, or he alone couldn't get universal health care passed in the 90s. Well, then it's his fault, and you shouldn't trust him. Like, how deranged do you have to be to attack somebody for being principled? It is disgusting. This campaign has really completely shifted my opinion of Elizabeth Warren. I don't give, I'm not going to swear here. I don't care at all about her anymore. I don't care. Like, I've talked before, more recently about she may face a primary challenge. Now, I'm not saying she's the first person that should be primary. Clearly, there are a lot of senators, like Joe Manchin, that should be primary before Elizabeth Warren. But let's be real here. The way she is treating the Democratic base, she cannot expect to keep doing this. She cannot expect to keep smearing Sanders and the Democratic base and not face any repercussions over it. Her support will drop considerably, as it has during this race. She's hit in fifth place now. And on top of that, she may face a primary challenge in the future because of who she has turned into during this campaign. It's disgusting. And Glenn Greenwald really shows you how disgusting it is. He tweets out, the New York Times today is reporting what has been obvious for a while. The Democratic establishment is cheering Warren's campaign because they know its only purpose, its only real effect, is to weaken Sanders and empower Biden. That is the function. So this is what the New York Times wrote. Ms. Warren, a progressive rival to Mr. Sanders, also showed no strong appeal to African-American voters in the Republican-leaning state. But unlike the moderate candidates, Ms. Warren was unlikely to face similar pressure to make way for Mr. Biden, and some party leaders hope she will stay in the race and complicate Mr. Sanders' efforts to consolidate the left. Warren's role right now, she's been coming in third, fourth, fifth. The only reason she is in this race right now is to damage Bernie Sanders. If you look at Morning Consult polling on this, and I believe other polling also backs this up, people that support Elizabeth Warren still, their second choice is Bernie Sanders. So if Warren were to drop out, it would help Bernie Sanders. Yet she remains in this race with zero path to the nomination. The only purpose for this campaign now is to hurt Bernie Sanders and his people-powered movement for a better life for everyone. She's completely destroyed her reputation, in my mind. I think I have one more tweet here to share. Yes. Likely Democratic primary voters. So this is from a CBS News Battleground Tracker YouGov poll. California and Texas, two Super Tuesday states where Bernie is looking really good right now. They prefer socialism to capitalism. So California, 57% for socialism to 45% for capitalism. Texas, it's even more extreme, 56% for socialism, positive view, capitalism, 37%. There is a strong potential right now that Bernie Sanders will sweep the delegates in California. A lot of polling is showing that he is the only one that has over 15% in California, which means statewide delegates, Bernie Sanders would just clean up. And Texas, he's also been increasing his lead in Texas over Joe Biden as well. Now, it remains to be seen if this South Carolina win for Joe Biden will help him in Texas and other southern states. I imagine it will somewhat. But will it be enough for Joe Biden to be able to win Texas over Bernie Sanders? We'll have to see, especially because Bernie Sanders has very strong Latino support, as you saw in Nevada, and that's of all ages, not just young people. So we're going to have to see how Super Tuesday plays out. But right now, it's looking really good for Bernie Sanders. And don't let the cable news distract you and make you think, oh, it's a whole new race now, because this is what they want the electorate to think. And apart from their best interest in terms of preserving the status quo, they also just want good television. And good television is, a race of two people going at it. If this was Bernie Sanders walking away with it, which it basically has up till now, and they haven't wanted to admit that, but if that's what it was, it's not as good television for them. Good television for them is a real competition. So they're going to try and make this into a real competition when still Bernie won 3 of the first 4 states, and that is massive by any metric. I mean, months ago, pundits on television were laughing at the idea that Bernie Sanders could win 3 of the first 4 states. And now he's done it. So this is all they have left, is to create this competition where there really isn't one. I will say, though, Joe Biden running, finally winning a state after running for president 3 different times, this is actually a good way for him to end his campaign. Or not even end his campaign, end his political career. Like, finally, he won a state, big, won it in South Carolina. I don't want to make any predictions. I don't think Biden's going to win, or I should say, I don't think Biden's going to end up at the convention with the most pledged delegates. I just don't see that happening based on every data point we've seen so far. So this actually, him winning South Carolina is actually a good way for him to kind of end his political career, even though he's going to be in this race, may likely win more states. But overall, I mean, might as well go out with something, with some kind of win. So even though Biden's not going to, like, just from the Biden perspective, it could have been a lot worse for him if he, lost South Carolina as well and dropped. It would have been just a horrible stain on his entire career to run for president in 2020 and not win a single state, come essentially last every time. So for him to win South Carolina, at least for the Biden camp, it's a nice way to kind of, put a bow on his career and end it at that, because he's not going to be the leader in pledged delegates by the convention. It's very likely going to be Bernie Sanders, just based on the data. Again, a lot can change based on one state, maybe, but the support there, the support is just not there on the ground for Joe Biden, which is why I don't think he'll be able to capitalize on this win the way that maybe another campaign could. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But overall, great night for Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders is still maintaining, and by all accounts, will do very well on Super Tuesday.